The moment my daughter Miranda wrinkled her nose and said, "My truck smelled like grease and fast food," something inside me just snapped. We were standing in the kitchen of the house I'd been paying for since 1987. The morning sun was coming through those old blinds, hitting the scarred wooden table where I'd just set down a paper bag with 2 breakfast burritos and a cup of coffee I hadn't finished from my last Doordash run. Miranda leaned against the counter with her arms crossed, looking at me like I'd tracked dog mess across her white carpet. "Dad, seriously," she said, waving her hand in front of her face like she was swatting flies. "Your truck reeks. It's embarrassing when Bradley has to ride in there." For a second, I just stood there holding my keys. I'm Roy Patterson, 62 years old, been fixing pipes for 40 years before my back gave out. Now I'm driving around delivering pancakes and egg sandwiches at 6 in the morning while my 34-year-old daughter sleeps until noon upstairs in my house with my 9-year-old grandson Mason. "Bradley?" I said slowly. This was the first I'd heard about any Bradley. Miranda rolled her eyes and headed for the fridge. "Yeah, my friend. Normal people don't want to ride around in a truck that smells like a McDonald's dumpster." Upstairs, I heard Mason's alarm clock going off. That meant my grandson was getting ready for school while his mother complained about the smell of honest work. The floorboard creaked. Mason was up, getting dressed for 4th grade. "Your friend Bradley," I said. "When did you start having friends over?" Miranda grabbed the orange juice and poured herself a glass. "God, Dad, I'm not 16. I can have people over." Mason came down the stairs a minute later, backpack over his shoulder, hair still messy from sleep. Good kid. Reminded me of myself at that age, responsible even when the adults around him weren't acting right. "Morning, Grandpa," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Morning, buddy. You ready for that math test?" Mason nodded and grabbed a banana from the counter. Miranda barely looked up from her phone. That's when I noticed she was dressed nice, too nice for someone who claimed she was staying home looking for work. "Were you headed today?" I asked her. She shrugged. "Out, meeting some people about job opportunities. I'd been hearing about these job opportunities for 8 months now, ever since she moved back in after her divorce. Funny thing about job opportunities, they never seem to happen during normal business hours." Mason finished his banana and headed for the door. "See you after school, Grandpa. I'll be here, buddy." After he left, the house got quiet. Miranda was still on her phone, typing away with that little smile she gets when she's talking to someone she likes. I stood there watching my daughter move around my kitchen like she owned it. And that's when the first real doubt crept into my head. See, I'd been telling myself she was just going through a rough patch. Divorce is hard, single mother trying to get back on her feet. All the things you tell yourself when your kid moves back home. But standing there with the smell of hash browns still on my jacket, I started wondering if maybe I'd been played. I picked up the paper bag from the table and tossed it in the trash. Miranda didn't even notice. She was too busy texting someone, probably this Bradley character. "I'm heading out for another run," I told her. She waved without looking up. "Cool. Can you grab groceries later? We're out of everything." That word hit different now. I grabbed my keys and headed for the truck. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in the parking lot of a Chinese restaurant waiting for an order when my phone buzzed. Text from Mason's school, emergency contact information needed updating. When I called to handle it, the secretary mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Oh yes, Mr. Patterson. Your daughter came by yesterday to update Mason's pickup authorization, added a Bradley Nash to the approved list." Bradley Nash. Miranda had given some guy I'd never met permission to pick up my grandson from school, and she hadn't said a word to me about it. That's when I decided to do a little investigating. The next morning, instead of starting my Doordash runs early, I parked down the street and watched my house. At 10:30 a.m., a red BMW pulled into my driveway. Out stepped a guy in his 30s, wearing clothes that cost more than I made in a week of driving. He walked up to my front door like he owned the place. Miranda met him at the door and they kissed. Not a friendly peck. The kind of kiss that told me this wasn't just some new friend. They got in his car and drove off, leaving me sitting there, realizing my daughter had been lying to my face for months. I spent the next 2 weeks paying attention to things I'd been too tired or too trusting to notice before. Like how Miranda always had money for new clothes but claimed she was broke when it came to helping with bills. How she went out 4 to 5 times a week but never seemed to actually interview anywhere. How she'd started talking about getting a fresh start and new opportunities without ever explaining what that meant. Then came the conversation that changed everything. I was in the garage organizing tools when I heard voices in the kitchen. The window was cracked and Miranda was on the phone, talking loud enough that I caught most of it. "No, babe, it's perfect," she was saying. "Dad's totally clueless. He thinks I'm job hunting." She laughed. "I know, right? He's so easy to manipulate. The guilt about mom dying still gets him every time. My wife Linda had passed 3 years ago, cancer. I'd been devastated, and Miranda had been my emotional support through the whole thing. Hearing her talk about using my grief to manipulate me felt like getting punched in the chest, but it got worse. The refinance papers should be ready next week, she continued. Once Dad signs those, we'll have enough for the down payment on that condo in Scottsdale. He'll never know what hit him, refinance papers. She was planning to trick me into refinancing my paid-off house so she could steal my equity and run off to Arizona with her boyfriend. I sat there in my garage, surrounded by 40 years worth of tools, and realized my daughter was planning to rob me blind. That night, I called my buddy Vincent Cole. Vincent had been the family lawyer since Linda and I got married. He'd handled her will, helped me with some contract disputes over the years. Good man, straight shooter. Roy, he said when I explained the situation, what you're describing sounds like elder financial abuse. It's a felony in this state. What can I do about it first? Don't sign anything. Second, start documenting everything. And third, we need to think about protecting your assets before she tries something stupid. So that's what I did. I started carrying my phone everywhere, recording conversations. I started taking pictures of Miranda's expensive shopping trips, her nights out with Bradley. I made copies of all my financial documents and gave them to Vincent. The evidence was easier to collect than I thought. Miranda wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She'd come home with shopping bags from expensive stores, claiming she'd bought things on sale or with gift cards from friends. She'd get her nails done every week, go out for expensive dinners, all while telling me she was too broke to help with the electric bill. One afternoon, I followed her to a fancy jewelry store downtown. Watched through the window as Bradley bought her a diamond bracelet that probably cost more than my truck was worth. That same evening, she asked me if I could loan her money for Mason's school supplies. I took pictures of everything, the shopping bags, the jewelry, Bradley's BMW parked in my driveway. Vincent told me to document dates, times, amounts, build a case like I was preparing for court, because that's exactly what I was doing. 2 weeks into my investigation, Mason started asking questions. Grandpa, why is Mom always on the phone whispering? Why does Bradley have a key to our house now? Mom said we might move to Arizona. Are you coming with us? That last one hit me hard. Miranda was already telling Mason they were leaving, probably trying to get him excited about it so he wouldn't resist when the time came. Using my grandson as another piece in her manipulation game. I sat Mason down that night after Miranda went out with Bradley. Hey buddy, I said, has your mom talked to you about moving? He nodded. She said we might get a new house with a pool, but I don't want to leave you, Grandpa. Well, let's not worry about that right now, okay? Sometimes adults talk about things that don't happen, but inside I was furious. Miranda wasn't just stealing from me, she was planning to steal my relationship with my grandson too. The next day I called Mason's father, Derek. Miranda's ex-husband was a decent guy, worked as an electrician about 30 minutes away. Their divorce had been bitter, but Derek had always been fair with me. Roy, I've been wondering about Mason's living situation, Derek said. He's mentioned this Bradley guy a few times and Miranda keeps changing her story about her job search. I told Derek everything. About the eavesdropping, the evidence I'd collected, Miranda's plan to refinance my house and move to Arizona. Jesus, Roy, I had no idea it was that bad. Derek, I need to ask you something. If I can prove Miranda's been lying about her financial situation and manipulating me for money, would that affect the custody arrangement? There was a pause. It might. The judge cares about stability. If Miranda's been claiming she's too broke for joint custody while actually living rent-free and stealing from you, that changes things. What if I told you I have recordings of her admitting to financial manipulation? Then I think we need to talk to my lawyer. 2 days later, Miranda made her move. She came to me with a folder full of official-looking papers and put on her sweet, concerned daughter act. Dad, I've been thinking about your financial situation, she said, sitting down across from me at the kitchen table. With Mason growing up and expenses increasing, maybe it makes sense to refinance the house, free up some cash flow. I looked at the papers. They were legitimate refinance documents, but Vincent had already warned me what to look for. Buried in the fine print was language that would make Miranda a co-owner of the property. Seems like a big decision, I said. Let me think about it. Miranda's mask slipped just a little. Dad, the rates are only good for another week. We really should move fast on this. There was that word again. Tell you what, I said. Why don't you explain exactly how this helps Mason's future? She launched into this whole speech about college funds and security, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was mentally spending my money. Sounds good, I told her. Let me have Vincent look over the paperwork first. That got a reaction. Why do you need a lawyer? It's just a simple refinance. Because I'm old and careful, I said. Vincent's handled my stuff for 30 years. Humor your old man. Miranda forced a smile, but I could see she wasn't happy about it. The next day, Vincent called me back. Roy, this isn't just a refinance. She's trying to get herself added to the deed. If you sign this, she becomes a legal owner of your property. She could force a sale even if you didn't want it. Can we turn this around on her? Vincent was quiet for a minute. Actually, yeah, there's something called a notice to quit for financial exploitation. If we can prove she's been taking advantage of you financially while living in your house, we can use that to legally require her to leave. Plus, if she's been lying about her financial situation to manipulate you, that could affect her custody arrangement with Mason. That got my attention. How so? Family courts take financial stability seriously. If her ex-husband can prove she's been committing elder financial abuse instead of actually looking for work, that changes everything. So we set up a trap. I told Miranda I decided to go ahead with the refinance, but Vincent had suggested a few additional documents to protect everyone's interests. What I was actually having her sign was an acknowledgement that she'd been living in my house rent-free for 8 months while claiming financial hardship, and a legal notice that her tenancy was being terminated for cause. She signed without reading it. The morning I planned to serve Miranda with the formal notice, Mason came down to breakfast looking worried. "Grandpa, Mom was on the phone crying last night. She said something about money and lawyers." I felt bad that the kid was getting caught up in this, but Miranda had made that choice when she decided to use him as leverage. Sometimes adults have to work out complicated problems, buddy, but no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. 3 days later, Vincent served her with the formal notice to quit. She had 30 days to vacate the property. The screaming match that followed was something else. "You can't kick me out," Miranda yelled. "I'm your daughter." "And I'm your father," I said calmly. "The father you've been lying to and stealing from for 8 months. I never stole anything." I pulled out my phone and played back one of the recordings. Her voice clear as day, talking about manipulating me and taking my money for a condo in Scottsdale. Miranda went pale. "You recorded me." "I documented criminal activity," I said. "There's a difference. That's when she tried to threaten me, said she'd take Mason and I'd never see him again. Said she'd tell everyone I was an abusive father. All the manipulative tricks that had worked on me when I was still grieving Linda. But I wasn't grieving anymore. I was angry. "Go ahead," I told her. "Call Derek and explain how you've been using your son as leverage to steal from his grandfather. I'm sure that'll go over real well in family court." I'd already called Derek, actually told him everything, shared the evidence with his lawyer. Turns out he'd been trying to get more custody for months, but Miranda had been claiming she was too financially unstable for shared custody. Finding out she'd been living rent-free in my house while lying about her job search changed his legal position completely. Miranda left that same day, moving in with Bradley. She took her clothes and her attitude, but Mason stayed with me until Derek could adjust his living situation. The kid handled it better than I expected. Kids are tougher than we think sometimes. "Is Mom in trouble?" he asked the night after she left. "She made some bad choices," I told him, "but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Are you in trouble too?" "Nobody." Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard decisions to protect the people they care about. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a couple named Keith and Donna Perry. They'd seen my house listing and wanted to schedule a showing. I hadn't even listed the house yet. Turns out Vincent had quietly put me in touch with Gloria Nash, the realtor who'd helped my neighbor sell his place last year. She'd been watching the market, and when I told her my timeline, she said she could have the house sold within a month. Keith and Donna loved the place. They loved the mature oak trees in the backyard, loved the vegetable garden Linda had planted, loved the quiet neighborhood. They made an offer the same day they saw it, $340,000, more than I'd expected. I accepted immediately. The closing was scheduled for 30 days later, which gave me time to find my own place and get Mason settled with Derek. Derek had been working on a custody modification since our conversation, and Miranda's situation had made his case stronger. Instead of every other weekend, he was getting joint custody. Mason would spend weekdays with his dad and weekends with me. "It's actually better this way," Derek told me. "Mason's closer to his school from my place, and he still gets to see you regularly. I found a small apartment near the Veteran Center where I'd started volunteering. Turns out a lot of older guys face the same manipulation from adult children, and my plumbing skills come in handy for the center's maintenance needs." The day before closing, Mason helped me pack the last boxes. "I'm going to miss this house," he said, sitting on the floor of his old room. "Me too, buddy. But sometimes you have to let go of one good thing to find something better. Will you still be my grandpa in your new place?" I laughed. "Mason, I'll be your grandpa no matter where I live. That's not something that changes." Miranda had tried to call a few times, but I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. Maybe someday I would be, but not while she was still with Bradley and still pretending she'd done nothing wrong. The morning of closing, I walked through the empty house one last time. 37 years of memories in these rooms, Linda's laughter in the kitchen, Miranda's first steps in the living room, Mason learning to ride a bike in the driveway. But it didn't feel sad walking through those empty rooms. It felt finished. Complete. Like closing a book you'd enjoyed but were ready to put down. I locked the front door for the last time and drove to Vincent's office for the closing. Keith and Donna were already there, excited about their new home. They shook my hand and thanked me for taking such good care of the place. "You can tell a house has been loved," Donna said. "It shows in every room." After all the paperwork was signed and the keys handed over, I walked out with a cashier's check for $340,000. After paying off Miranda's credit card debt, which I'd been covering without realizing it, and Vincent's legal fees, I had enough left to live comfortably and help Mason with college someday. The real kind of help, not manipulation disguised as family loyalty. That afternoon, I moved into my new apartment near the Veterans Center. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, small kitchen, narrow balcony overlooking the river, but it was mine. No one was using my grief against me. No one was treating my generosity like weakness. Mason spent his first weekend with me there 2 weeks later. He loved the balcony, loved watching the boats go by on the river. "This is nice, Grandpa," he said, sitting beside me in the lawn chairs I'd set up outside. "It's peaceful." "Yeah, it is. Do you miss the old house?" I thought about that for a minute. I miss some things about it. I miss the memories your grandma and I made there. But I don't miss feeling like a stranger in my own home. Mason nodded like he understood, which surprised me. "Kids pick up on more than we think," Mom called Dad last week, he said. She was crying. "Oh," she said, "you were being mean to her." But Dad told her that wasn't true. I was glad Derek had handled that conversation. Mason didn't need to hear the details of what his mother had done, but he deserved honesty about the situation. "Sometimes adults make choices that hurt people they love," I told him. "That doesn't mean they're bad people, but it does mean there have to be consequences. Like when I break the rules and lose my video game privileges. Something like that. Yeah, these days I drive for Doordash because I want to, not because I have to. Usually just a few hours in the morning, enough to stay busy and help with expenses. The truck still smells like French fries sometimes, but nobody complains about it anymore. The Veterans Center keeps me busy too. There's always something that needs fixing: leaky pipes, stuck windows, electrical problems that require more skill than the volunteers usually have. Turns out 40 years of plumbing experience translates pretty well to general maintenance. More importantly, I've met other guys dealing with similar family situations. Bob Martinez, 68, whose son kept borrowing money and never paying it back. Frank Wilson, 71, whose daughter moved in after her divorce and then tried to get him declared incompetent so she could control his finances. We call ourselves the Wisdom Group, though that's probably giving us more credit than we deserve. Mostly we just drink coffee and share stories about learning to set boundaries with adult children who never grew up. The hardest part, Bob told me last week, is accepting that loving someone doesn't mean enabling them. Frank nodded. "I spent 20 years trying to rescue my daughter from her own bad decisions. All I did was teach her that I'd always be there to clean up her messes." I've been thinking about that conversation a lot lately, about the difference between helping and enabling, about how sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. It's been 8 months since Miranda left. She's never called to apologize or explain herself. Derek tells me she and Bradley broke up about 3 months ago. Apparently the stress of actually having to support herself put a strain on their relationship. She's living in a studio apartment now, working part-time at a retail job. Maybe someday she'll realize what she lost. Maybe she'll want to rebuild our relationship on honest terms. If that day comes, I'll be ready to listen. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not going to let hope turn into another form of manipulation. Mason's doing well. His grades improved after he got settled with Derek, and he's made friends in his new school. He still spends every weekend with me, and we've developed our own routines. Saturday morning pancakes on the balcony, Sunday afternoon fishing at the pier. Simple pleasures that don't cost much but mean everything. Last weekend, he asked me something that caught me off guard. "Grandpa, are you happier now?" I thought about that question while I tied a new lure on his fishing line. Was I happier? I was definitely more peaceful, less stressed, more in control of my own life. "Yeah, buddy," I said finally. "I think I am. Good. You smile more now. Kids notice everything. The important thing is I've got my self-respect back. I've got a relationship with my grandson that's honest and healthy, and I've learned something valuable that I wish I'd figured out years ago. Love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just enabling. When I talk to other guys my age who are dealing with manipulative adult children, I tell them what Vincent told me. Document everything. Protect your assets, and don't let guilt override common sense. Elder financial abuse is real. It's more common than people think, and it's not something you have to tolerate just because the person doing it shares your DNA. But I also tell them this: setting boundaries doesn't mean you stop loving someone. It just means you love yourself enough to demand respect. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it means you get to spend Saturday mornings eating pancakes with your grandson while watching boats drift down the river, knowing that nobody's using your generosity against you. That's not a bad way to spend your golden years. Because at 62, I finally learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And sometimes the people who need boundaries the most are the ones who claim they love you. The greatest gift you can give your family isn't endless sacrifice. It's showing them what self-respect looks like, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted to keep.